Good morning.
Hey Ali.
Hi, and welcome everyone to Let's Be Frank. Today is last week we spoke a little bit about self awareness, and I think that kind of led into this idea of self help. And you've been thinking a little bit about self help books. I've been reading a lot of books, some of them could possibly be classed as self help, and I would say they have helped me. So I suppose that's a self help book. But yeah, they're very popular. They've been popular for a very long time. There are a lot of them. And you read an article where someone was trying to condense kind of all of the self help uh, points or actions into a list.
Yeah, I think it was quite an interesting article. It says compilation of advice, from a whole bunch of books, and it came up with 11 rules, and I read through them and I thought, wow, this is pretty much spot on. So I'll just quickly run through them. Number one is take one small step. Number two is change your mental maps. Number three, struggle is good, scary is good. Number four, instant judgment is bad. Number five, remember the end of your life. Six is be playful. Seven is be useful to others. Eight is perfectionism equals procrastination. Nine is sleep, exercise, eat, chill out, repeat. 10 is write it all down. And 11 is you can't get it all from reading. And I thought, wow, that's a really good summary.
Yeah.
I think I've read books on each of these
Yeah.
points, maybe
Definitely.
multiple ones.
Yeah. My first thought was I wonder if ChatGPT wrote this article.
No, the article actually dates pre-Chat GPT.
Okay.
Um, now, they didn't mention how many books, whether they actually um, try to kind of count how many self-help books.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's also interesting. I mean, it's not a recent phenomenon. I mean, we mentioned a couple of chats ago. We mentioned Stoicism, um, and that's definitely counts as a type or form of self-help,
Yeah.
um, giving you those guidelines as to how to live your life. And so much of it is still true and valid today in our context. So if we go through the list, is there one that stand out
I mean,
for
all
you?
of them stood out for me. I can smile through all of them and go, yep, yep. I can see, because I can see I've been making a lot of changes in my life, and I can see how a lot of these things have helped me improve myself. Um, so, eat, sleep, exercise, obviously,
Mm,
huge one.
yeah.
Journaling, you said write everything down. Um, I can't remember. I need to open up the list.
Well, take one small step. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that we've
Oh, about daily
discussed.
habits. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a number of books that immediately come to mind just when we talk about take one small step. But in terms of your reading journey, that's exactly what you did was
Yeah.
take one small step, and a number
Chapter a
of other
day.
changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is definitely such a valid thing for anything that you want to tackle in life is just take one small step,
Yeah.
and then build on that. So we can't fault that.
Yeah.
Change your mental maps. I suppose some of the books that you've read will fall into that category.
Yeah. The talking about the voice in your head, the chimp paradox, the untethered soul, um, yeah, about thinking. Well, acknowledging the way that your mind works and and working out how to best use your thoughts and judgments and um, yeah. But I think that one also, the mind mapping, is also relevant to habits because it's about forming these habits in your
Yeah,
mind, that you can continue. That's, yeah.
correct. It's would it be correct to say it's how to bullshit yourself so that you can stop bullshitting yourself?
Yeah, wasn't one of the lines in the article was like, fake it till you make it?
Yeah, yeah, I think that that appeared there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, look, I suppose one can say just in terms of building these habits and the the mental maps that you have to change, but then there are also bigger, more complicated mental maps. Um,
We spoke about that a bit about the unlearning, I think. The way that you've been raised and the things that you've been taught throughout life, like some of these things that you've taken as truth that
correct.
maybe at the time you didn't question enough or interrogate enough or do enough research on. Um,
Or
yeah,
understood enough to be
yeah.
able to question that. Yeah, so that's a very valid one. Struggle is good and scary is good.
Fear
Um,
of failure.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's the thing about the struggle. I think we also touched on that a couple of chats ago. We spoke about, if everything came easy, then would you experience the same sense of gratification once you achieve it?
yeah.
Um, Scary is good. Scary, I suppose there's so many different levels of scary.
Um,
Um,
I'm busy reading Bob Iger's autobiography now, the
yeah,
Disney CEO. Um, what's it called? The Ride of a Lifetime. And he's also got his 10 principles for leadership, and his second one is courage. And he talks about risk taking is essential and innovation is vital, and true innovation only occurs when people have courage. Um, and he also says fear of failure destroys creativity. So I think he's probably also read a few self help books.
correct. And I think I think you'd be hard pressed to find any of these well-known business leaders
Yeah,
whose life story doesn't include some variation of that.
yeah,
I was just listening to somebody going through the life story of oh no, I forget the gentleman's name, but the person who's kind of started Price Club, which preceded Walmart. Eventually, they sold to Walmart. Walmart. Um, similar thing there,
yeah.
and I think you get that in Jeff Bezos and
Definitely Elon Musk.
Elon Musk,
The
Bill Gates. I mean, the whole lot of them.
billions of
Yeah,
dollars on
yeah,
rockets that failed, and
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, Richard Branson, he's been quiet of late, but that's definitely a big part of his story and of his success and how he got to was taking those risks, which so many other people would have said, "You're crazy." But I mean, even in our fairly mundane daily lives, I mean, we take little risks here and there.
yeah,
Um, and I think understanding or knowing or just be aware of when you take those risks can certainly help
yeah.
when you're faced with something slightly bigger, slightly more scary, but knowing that it's actually going to work out okay. Instant judgment is bad.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Don't you think so?
Well, with regards to the self,
Yeah.
mm,
Mm, I think the way that he describes it there makes it. When we've spoken before about respond, don't react.
yeah,
Um, so I think that makes sense. That your first reaction to something is not necessarily the best one, and give yourself time to really look at the situation, um, maybe from a different perspective before responding to it.
Yeah. No, in that sense, I can agree with that. Remember the end of your life.
Yeah.
That's quite an interesting one. Is that an exercise something that you've contemplated?
Um, Not hugely, but I get it. It's the one thing that we can all agree on is that we're all going to die. I mean, unless you believe that science is going to be so advanced in the next few years that we can all be cryogenically frozen and come back and live forever. I don't know. So everyone's going to die. You never know when your time is. I think about it in the sense that I'm trying to be happy all the time so that I don't have any regrets and I don't feel like I've missed out on something. Um, yeah. So I'm very aware of the fact that I'm not going to live forever, and try to live in the moment is my response to that.
Yeah, one of the exercises that I've seen people do, and I haven't done it myself, is say, well, write your own tombstone. You know, what would you like to be written on your tombstone one day? Um, you know, I think the point is invariably um, nobody wants it to say, I made it gazillion dollars. You know, everybody
Yeah.
wants to be remembered as the father, the partner, the special person, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I think where I see value in that is if we if that is your real aspiration, say this is what I would like to be on my tombstone one day. It can kind of guide you
Yeah.
a little bit in terms of how you should live your life.
Yeah.
You know,
Where to
kind of
focus your energy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and type of activities that you should focus your energy on, etc.
Yeah. Well, like you say, if the
So
thing is that you want to be remembered for being a good father, then you know to invest more time in your family and your
yeah,
children, and yeah.
correct. But I don't. Yeah, as I say, I haven't done the exercise, and it's not something that is top of mind for me. It's um, the times that I have read something along those lines and so on, kind of like the one thought that come up with me is, do I really care
Yeah.
what other people think of? You understand? Not in a
Yeah.
bad way, not like screw them all or whatever,
Yeah.
But is it really going to matter? I don't know if you've been to a funeral lately.
I've been,
Yeah,
yeah,
could you
most
remember?
recently to online ones because of COVID.
Hmm. Um, I find it quite strange,
Yeah.
the whole funeral thing. Um,
Well, like Rich Mulholland talks about it in Legicide, about the whole coffin thing, about how that's a legacy because of there was some reason for the coffins or whatever, and he's like,
yeah,
now it's
yeah.
just stupid.
Just something that stands out for me is that the funeral is all about the living and not about the person who passed away. It's like I don't know, the speeches that are given, the tears that are shed, the everything's about the people who
Yeah,
attend, people who
yeah,
stay behind. It's not so much. Yes, there is that thing about respect and so on. But anyway, that could be another episode. Funerals. um,
And can we include weddings in that? We'll do a four weddings and a funeral
In,
episode.
I haven't been to a wedding in a while, so
I feel
I'll
like you
work
should
on
also
that.
mention them in Legicide, even though, I mean, he's had two, I think. So,
Yeah. Okay. So the next one on the list is be playful. Yeah, that seems such an obvious
yeah,
statement, but it's so true. The fact that it made the list here is that is also a very common
yeah,
theme that you find in all these self-help books.
yeah. Well, the happiness hypothesis is all about finding happiness
Mm.
and doing things that make you happy. And yeah, don't know. That is an interesting.
So
I don't even remember reading that one. I
I
did
was
read
just
it
going to
very
ask
quickly
you
this
about it.
morning.
I was going to ask you about that. Did you find that a useful book?
The happiness hypothesis. No,
Mm.
it was one of my least favorite. In the I'm now on book number 19, and it came highly recommended by same said person, Rich Mulholland, as a book that will change my
Okay.
life. I don't feel like it did change my life, but it could also be the timing when I read it. Um, I had recently read The Untethered Soul and The Chimp Paradox, and I also read a um, fiction book just before The Happiness Hypothesis, Speculator, and it was one of the
Hmm.
first fictions that I read in my list. So maybe it was also just the timing, but I just felt it was a bit like you say, obvious. It was a bit. It wasn't. I mean, there were no revelations that I felt would change how I live or feel,
Yeah.
or I don't know.
So what is the premise of the book? Where do you find happiness?
I can't even remember. I'm gonna grab it quickly. um, okay, so he talks about like the different. So he talks about meditation, cognitive therapy, as well as medical. So things like Prozac. He talks about all the different ways that you can make yourself happy, natural and unnatural. Um, I, I can't even remember.
But
So, oh, he talks about things like marriage. So, like having partnership can make you happy, and I honestly don't even
but
remember the book.
so far everything that you've mentioned can also make you very sad and
Yeah.
miserable.
Well,
And
this is the other thing. It was kind of like these are all things that people do to, and he also looked at like the Stoics and what previous people have said about happiness and um, relates back to them. I don't know. It didn't give me the formula for happiness.
yeah, yeah.
I was
Well, yeah,
disappointed.
okay. Yeah, my understanding is that happiness is an emotion.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can
Plan for.
grab and bottle and okay, cool, now I have it,
Yeah.
you know? Um, so, and I think life would be fairly boring if you just have consistent level of happiness.
Yeah. So I'm thinking now about this be playful one because I like the example he gave of the guy dancing to living on a prayer or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that has helped me. I learned a lot from my partner is not to care so much what other people think about me because I think for a very long time I was very concerned about what everyone else thinks of me and that everyone's looking at me and which is also incredibly arrogant to think that people gave a shit what I was doing. But yeah, I've learned to not really care too much what other people think. And if I feel like dancing while I'm walking down the street, I'll dance. And if I feel like singing, even though I'm off key, I'll sing. And that has definitely improved. That, and I think that
Mm.
relates to this kind of playfulness. This really like not caring, a bit like Mark Manson, the subtle art of not giving a fuck, because no one actually. Everyone cares
Yeah.
about themselves. No one really cares what the other person's doing.
Yeah, it's not to say that we don't care about each other, care
Yeah,
about other people, you know, trying to just be obnoxious or that sort of thing, you know. But there's a so I think that that's one of the main reasons why people have pets.
Yeah.
Is it's easy to be playful with a pet. You
Yeah.
kind of see it as part of your job to speak in the funny voice to the dog
Yeah.
or the cat or the whatever, you know. Um, there's definitely something that is part of a happy life. This is to be playful.
Yeah.
I think at whatever stage or phase or age or whatever of your life, one must be playful. Number 7 says, be useful to others.
Yeah.
What do you understand as be useful to others?
Um. Hmm. There's so many different contexts. This is gonna be very random, but I was watching a reality dating show recently. I do still watch mindless TV amongst my reading, and there was one person who really stood out for me because she was so insistent on saying whenever someone was upset or going through something or angry or whatever, she would always say, "What can I do to help you? You know, like how can I be of service to you right now? What can I do?" Um, and I don't know, it was just something really nice about the fact that she wasn't looking inward or trying to. She was asking the person, "How can I help you?" And I quite like that. I think it was it FNB or Standard Bank, the "How can I help you" tagline.
Oh
The
my
"How can
word.
we help you?"
How can I help you?
Yeah, but I
If
just
in FNB,
yeah.
have you tried to get help from them recently?
Yes, and from another country. It's lots of fun. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I like that. I like that concept of how can I help you? How can we help you? I don't know that it always works in practice because sometimes people don't know what they need or the help that they're looking for.
So would you say that Henry Ford helped a hell of a lot of people,
Yes.
and Steve Jobs and Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos and Bill Gates
Yeah.
and and so the list can go and on and on and on and
Yeah.
on. In other words, people that, depending on where you sit on the political spectrum or whatever, you may either love or hate them.
Yeah.
But the fact is, they helped us a hell of a lot.
Mm-hmm. I hear that.
They never got up in the morning to say, well, how can I in future help
How do you
some
know?
random person? No, so I think it's a good idea to. Have you read any of Ayn Rand's works?
No, I've got it on my
Not.
list. It's one of the books I need to buy.
Please do. But
Yeah.
in preparation, there's I think on YouTube you'll find some video clips where she speaks about selfishness.
Cool.
Because the reason I'm asking these questions is that I think that the concept of selfishness and be useful to others is misunderstood.
Yeah.
Again, because the way that we were brought up, don't be selfish.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes the best thing you can do for others
Yeah.
and for yourself is to be selfish.
Well, it's that whole the aeroplane oxygen mask situation where you can't help
Yeah,
others until you've helped yourself.
correct,
Yeah.
correct, 100%. Yeah. Okay, and then the next one on the list is perfectionism equals procrastination.
Yeah. So this also came up in the Bob Iger Leader 10 Leadership Principles. He talks about the I can't remember if the word was passionate. I don't think so. I think I'm mixing it up with something else. But anyway, the passionate pursuit of perfection. And he talks about how that's one of the principles to pursue perfection, but that doesn't mean that he expects everything to be perfect or that everything's. So I
Mm.
think that there's this thing about you want to pursue perfection because obviously you want to be the best, and I think it's a Five Friday principle as well. Close enough is not good enough,
Yeah,
but also understanding that nothing is ever going to be perfect.
correct. I think it's so important. We can kind of go back to the very first item on the list is take one small step.
Yeah,
And if you have to sit and wait until something is perfect,
yeah,
um, there's no opportunity to really grow and improve.
yeah,
Otherwise, we wouldn't get all these new versions of iPhones or
yeah,
notebooks or software or whatever released
yeah,
every so often. We wouldn't get any new cars or, in other words, there's nothing that I think that we can describe as perfect.
no. It's almost like an ideal that you know is never going to be reached, but you must always strive for.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the example that's often used is you cannot sit and wait until you are perfectly trained to run a marathon without
Yeah,
actually going and or first do around the block and then
yeah,
you know kind
yeah,
of build up towards that point where you. I do think that is something that maybe a lot of people.
it's an interesting sound.
Sorry, that is my co-worker that just.
He looks very comfy. Looks like the CEO there in the background.
Is let's see if I give him his squeak. Hey, there's a squeak.
You're just demonstrating the be playful.
Um, Now you're going to hear the muffled barks with a squeak in his mouth.
This is real life.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Sleep, exercise, eat, chill out. I mean, that is such an obvious one, and
Yeah,
probably the one that most people have this constant battle with.
yeah. Add breathing in there.
Yeah, true.
Mm.
Um, and look, it's just one of those things that the more people kind of go back to point number one, take one small step and change your mental maps, um, and just get going with it, and
Yeah,
then kind of be a little bit more comfortable with where you are.
yeah,
But it's interesting. More and more research about sleep being is kind of coming out, and the massive benefits
yeah,
that people gain from just making sure that they get good quality sleep.
yeah,
Um, I'm definitely not an expert on that, or don't know enough about the research and so on to say, but yeah, such an obvious one, and it's really sad. I saw a stat this morning in one of the weekly newsletters that I get that said I think 17 to 24-year-old Americans, of the 17 to 24-year-old Americans, 76% of them will not qualify to be enlisted in the US Army. Um, and it's not just um, because they are obese and unfit. I suspect that that is
part of
a
it.
big percentage of it,
Yeah,
because the other two things that were mentioned is either they have a criminal record or they have some other medical condition.
okay,
But that is quite scary to think that such a high percentage of a country of that size, um, of the population will not qualify.
Yeah. What was the
You know,
percentage again?
76%.
Okay.
It is shocking.
Yeah.
It is absolutely shocking. So we see this play out not just in America, but if you look at obesity levels um, around especially the developed world,
Yeah.
in that is just going up and up and up. Um, we see how many people suffer from all sorts of disorders, etc., which I think can be directly related back to the simple things like what you eat and how much physical activity you get and how good your sleep is.
Yeah.
Anyway, it would be nice. Let's send the whole world on a boot camp of
Boot
some
camp. Yeah, I
sort.
was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Number 10, write it all down.
Got my journal here.
I see a very enthusiastic nod of the head there. Yes.
Yeah. One of the things I was also thinking about is for all of these, as we were going through them, is how important a dashboard is. And I know in business that's a big thing, being able to like see visually where you are is so important. So for me, the habit tracker has been really useful. Just getting to like swipe and say that I've achieved something each
Mm.
day. And I put really small things. So like I put that I did my journal, that I read my chapter, and that I read my page of the Daily Stoic, each as individual tasks. So I already know every morning I'm going to mark off 3 of my little tasks on the habit tracker. And then there's a few that are maybe a little bit less likely to happen every day, maybe swimming in the sea or having a workout or going for a walk, or writing my book has been left blank for a few months now. But yeah, just having that visual reminder is so useful, which is I think where the writing down thing comes in as well, and being able to go back and see what's happened
Yeah,
over time.
I think that's a very useful exercise, the part of going back and seeing how you've progressed.
Can I also just say, from a memory point of view, it's a great
Mm.
reminder. I was going back last night through my journal, and I had written down as one of my achievements for the day that I finished my book, but I meant I finished reading my book. And so then I just put a little clarification in there. I didn't finish writing my book, I finished reading my book. And one of the other things was I've started meeting a lot of new people because I've joined a gym and I go swimming, and I've been trying very hard to remember all of their names. So I've met a lot of people recently. So as soon as I've met them that night when I get home, I write down their names and a little descriptor so that I remember how I know them. And I walked past one of the ladies I met in gym when I was on a walk the other day, and I
Hmm.
knew that I had written her down in my diary, but I couldn't draw the name from my memory. So when I got home, I checked and I was like, oh, I did think it was that. So I checked and I had her name written down, and I'll never forget her name.
Yeah, now you'll never forget her name. Um, if I remember correctly, Jim Quick had some really nice
Yes.
tips for how to remember names,
Yeah.
because that is quite a challenge, especially if you kind of in a group setting and you're introduced to 5 or 10 people, um, and
Yeah.
it's always a challenge to remember the names.
Yeah.
And I think the best one that I've heard is the repeat the name
Yes.
as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So as soon as
That
you're
seems to
introduced, you
work
say,
well.
nice to
Yeah,
meet you, Herman. And when you leave,
correct.
thank you, Herman. Goodbye, Herman. And it's
Yeah,
fine.
yes, that helps a hell of a lot
Yeah.
to. But I also like to, if I can, to make a note to
Yeah.
to just physically write the name down, and that also helps me remember the names. Anyway, we digress. The write it all down part. Um, so I think that is a that is a very useful tip in terms of whether it's a journal where you write down the things that you accomplished, what your day was like, and all these
Yeah.
different forms that a journal can take. Um, I also find it very useful to make notes for myself in terms of key takeouts of an article or a book that I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm at my desk or so and I'm listening to a podcast, I'll actually write down. And that's the one thing that I miss is an audio, an app that allows me to make notes because I
Yeah.
consume a lot while I'm driving. And then there's something that is mentioned, and I want to either read up on that or I want to follow up on that,
Yeah.
and so on. And I have I have to then, as soon as I stop somewhere, I hopefully remember, and it
Can't you
doesn't
use
always
like
work.
a dictation thing in your notes app or
Um,
something like that where you can
I'm sure there are
yeah,
apps available. I'm looking for that
inaudible.
really simple solution in
Yeah.
Audible
Yeah.
or in podcasts, um, to be able to just say something and it's
Yeah, you say
kind of
make a
logged
note
somewhere.
and then it documents it
Yeah.
some way. Well, if
Anyway,
anyone's
so
listening and wants to do that.
I'm sure it's available.
Yeah.
It must be available. But anyway, so we agree that there's some really good benefits in terms of
Yeah.
writing it down,
Also,
whatever.
manifestation, writing down what you want to achieve or what you want out of life.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that just off the top of my head that are big fans of the vision board type thing. John
Mm-hmm.
Assaraf is one. Peter Diamandis, I think, is another one. Tony
Tiger
Robbins
Woods.
is another. Tiger Woods. Just I'm not sure what his dream board looked like at some stage of his life, but
Might have had some supermodel
um,
cutouts on.
yeah.
No, I'm
Um,
just joking.
but it is very powerful if you really want something and you're prepared to work for it. I think that's the part where just the manifestation and believing that the universe is going to bring it to you, that's bullshit. But if there's something that you really want, and that constant reminder um, can definitely help. And then number 11 is you can't get it all from reading. That is such a pity because I would have been freaking perfect by now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that goes without saying. I mean, it
Yeah.
kind of takes us all the way back to number one. Take one small step.
Yeah. It's all that thing about you can only prepare for so long, at some point you have to go out and do, or there's all the quotes about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
first say to yourself what you would be and then do what you have to do.
Who said that?
That was Epictetus.
Aha, I was going to say, I mean, that advice definitely goes back
Yeah.
um, to the Stoics.
Yeah. But there's also, here's an Estee Lauder quote: I never dreamed about success, I worked for it.
Yeah,
Although the dream often comes
fascinating,
first.
fascinating woman. Listen
Yeah.
to her life story on Founders podcast.
And here we go today, Mark Twain. The secret of getting ahead is getting started. All of these quotes in this journal are about just do it.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a fascinating list. It was fun to go through all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool.
Um,
Good find.
the one thing for me that above all stands out is take one small step
Yeah.
because it's very it's
100%.
very easy to correct
Yeah.
course or
Yeah.
to make a change. Um, but when you kind of procrastinate it long enough that you put all your chips in one roll of the dice, it's not that easy. It's not possible to make that change.
Yeah.
And by no means are we saying to stop reading. Huh?
Well, no. That's part of my small step. My one chapter a day. I'm on book number 19 for the
Yeah.
year. Yeah. Keep reading, but also do.
Keep reading and do. Fantastic.
Cool. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Herman.
Ellie.
Bye.
Thanks.